Today is June 21st, 2019. My name is Joe Todd. This is an interview with Vance Davis in Muskogee, Oklahoma. Sir, where were you born?
St. Louis, Missouri.
St. Louis, Missouri. When's your birthday?
July the 16th, 1947.
1947. Who is your father?
James Edward Davis.
And your mother?
Bonnie Ruth Simmons Davis.
Ruth Simmons. Did you go through school in St. Louis?
I attended the kindergarten there at Clinton Peabody School. It was just wasn't high school or elementary, it was just Clinton Peabody School, and that was in 1951.
Then where'd the family move to?
Japan.
Japan. Father in the Army?
Yes, 32 years.
32 years.
He was going to make a career out of it.
So where in Japan?
Fukuoka, Camp Kashi.
Camp?
Kashi, K-A-S-H-I.
Where in Japan is that located?
Southernmost island of Kyushu.
Okay.
Nearest city was Fukuoka.
Yes. What did your father do in the Army?
Well, he started off as an infantryman and a paratrooper. And at World War II, he was in the 509th Parachute Battalion as an infantryman. And he and PFC Paul B. Huff of Cleveland, Tennessee were in the same unit together. And he got wounded in World War II, had a lung blowed out with shrapnel, was left to die on the battlefield. And Paul B. Huff couldn't stand that thought because they'd gone through basic and jump school together, and he ran out there and scooped him up. And when he scooped him up, he ran his hand into my dad's back that was wide open from a shrapnel wound, and he said, "I'm sorry, Jim," picked him up and carried him off the battlefield. The medic said, "He's going to die anyway." He said, "Not if I can help it." They got him to a hospital up in Oran, North Africa, and got him taken care of, and he came back home to the United States. Of course, they discharged him. And not long after the end of the war, they had a thing called Circular 6 that went out to all wounded veterans that would like to come back in because they were running short of qualified NCOs anymore. And Dad signed that Circular 6 and came back in and remained in again until 1969 in June when he retired. He was at Army Aviation Command in St. Louis, Missouri at that time doing quality assurance work for air delivery operations.
Okay. You go to school in Japan?
Yes, I did. It was Fukuoka had a general American school there for all military dependents to attend. I went to the first and part of the second grade there. Then we transferred back to the United States to Fort Bragg.
Fort Bragg. Where did you graduate high school?
Fort Campbell, Kentucky.
Fort Campbell, Kentucky. What year?
1965.
1965.
4 days later, my dad left for the advance party to Vietnam. 9 months later, I arrived in Vietnam.
You played sports in high school?
Yes, I did.
What'd you play?
Played football, wrestled, and track.
Have a good team?
Very good team. Very good team. Fort Campbell High School, since it was a military high school, never knew what the coach never knew what he was going to have from year to year because parents get transferred out, and next year's team may not look anything like last year's. May not have any returning starters, or may have half a dozen. And that coach was Marshall Patterson, and he eventually, just a few years ago, was voted into the Kentucky State High School Coaches Hall of Fame. 35 years as a football coach and athletic director.
In your schooling, who was your favorite teacher?
My favorite teacher in all of my high school and education was Mr. Hall. He was a history teacher.
Where?
Fort Campbell, Kentucky.
Why was he your favorite?
I loved history, and I was sitting in his classroom in 1962 when a broadcast came over the PA system that President John F. Kennedy had been assassinated. 63, yeah, 63, I'm sorry, yeah. That he had been assassinated. Mr. Hall had everybody stop at that moment, close their books, and bow their heads in prayer. And he always impressed me as a very good man. And the second greatest teacher I had was a lady in the 7th grade at Graceland School in Memphis, Tennessee, which is behind Elvis's mansion. Well, it used to be, it's gone now. Her name was Mrs. Neville. And she was one of those old-fashioned teachers that just would put your feet to the fire till you learned what she was teaching you. She was very good, though. I never forgot a lot of things she told me, like a boy can't learn anything with his mouth open.
What did you think traveling around, going to all these different schools?
I went to 17 schools before I graduated from high school, and it was a way of life. It just seemed like that was what I was supposed to do. That's all we did. We moved a lot. My dad was in the quartermaster depot program for a lot of years with air delivery operations, running parachute operations, in support of the 101st, in support of the Utah National Guard. We lived in Ogden, Utah as well, went to Walquest Junior High School, and so every period of time, sometimes 3 months, sometimes 6 months, we'd move again. In Indiana, I went to 4 different schools in Indiana alone, and when we came back from Japan, as a matter of fact. So we did a lot of moving around, and I never really had a home, never really had lifelong friends. I can remember a kid that was my friend before I went to Japan named Greg, but very few after that until I got it out of high school that I could remember and say this was a lifelong friend. And John Bianchini, we called him John Bianchini in school. He married, and his wife's a little more upper crust in Franklin, Tennessee. She likes to say Bianchini. I said, well, I just call him Sally Buns because that was his nickname. But John Bianchini was a good man. He is a Special Forces Operations All-American, little All-American high school football running back who lost his legs in Vietnam, so with the 5th Special Forces Group as well. So other than that, not a lot of lifelong friends. Yeah. Got one in northwest Nebraska that was a nom with me. We came back and served together in the hospital at Fort Leonard Wood, lived right next door to each other at Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, James Ruffing. And he is about 6'4" and weighed less than me because he was just so thin. We just called him Slim.
What did you do after high school?
After high school, I immediately went to work for McDonnell Douglas Aircraft Corporation in St. Louis. Moved from Fort Campbell up there. That's where my dad and mom's families, majority of them resided in the St. Louis area, and Dad wanted us to be close to family in case anything happened to him. And I worked for McDonnell for about 3 to 4 months. I got tired of it. I said, there's a war going on. And all my life, I'd heard nothing but my dad's war stories. I felt like I fought them all. I heard them so many times, I thought, I won't have any war stories if I don't hurry up and get over there. So I quit McDonnell Douglas and enlisted and went straight to Fort Benning.
What did you do at McDonnell Douglas?
I was a quality assurance. I was in photo reproductions and graphic arts. Okay. I did a lot of work on glass slides of the imprinting of photos with wiring diagrams. Had a very excellent job. Wasn't anything wrong with the job. Had a top secret clearance right out of high school. Mm-hmm. And of course I had to get debriefed by the Department of the Navy, and a few other people came to see me when I quit work there. And but it was a good job, and I made good money. I was getting paid more than my sister, who had a whole year of college behind her, and I didn't. I was just out of high school, but I enjoyed the job, but I just felt that I needed to be in the military. If there's a war going on. When did you join the
Army? When did you join the Army?
I joined the Army in December 1965.
Why did you join the Army or the Navy, Marines, or Air Force?
I joined because I'd been raised all my life to be a soldier. I just had. My dad started me at the age of 5, treating me like I was one of his troops, basically, and my bedroom area had to stay that way. My shoes had to be lined up at the edge of my bed. I had a foot locker at the end of my bed. All my clothes, except for shirts and dress slacks, which hung in the closet buttoned up in color order. And all my clothes, underwear and socks and my toilet article equipment was all in the foot locker at the end of the bed, just like I was in the Army. Socks rolled, T-shirts rolled, drawers rolled. And he'd hit that door every morning at about 5:30 and said, get it. And he came out of the bathroom, then I was next in there, and I had 15 minutes to shower and clean up and get ready for school from the time I was 5 till I graduated from high school.
Where'd you go for your basic training?
Fort Benning, Georgia.
Fort Benning, Georgia.
Sand Hill.
Tell me about basic.
Basic was really interesting. I was at home. I really was. My first sergeant, there was a first sergeant, his name was Hendricks. Mm-hmm. And the first morning we were there, I showed up with fatigues, jump boots, and combat boots. I had my own already. I had government orders at the time where I had already qualified with all of the light weapons infantry program with the M14, M16. I'd qualified with a 45 and a 38 special for military shooting. And we did this because of our scout troop, our explorer post at Fort Campbell, Kentucky. We were all military brats there in that explorer post. That's one of the requirements. Your father had to be in the military. And so we were afforded the opportunity to go out and take classes or participate in training programs with the military, and our dads just signed a release. I went through airborne school there with the Black Hats at Fort Campbell. Also went through the counterinsurgency, counter-guerrilla warfare school with the 187th Airborne Regimental Combat Team, and they just put my social security number down there rather than, I didn't have an Army serial number because that's still using serial numbers then. So we got to go, we wore fatigues, and so when I got to Fort Benning, Georgia, I had a uniform. I just put it on and stepped out in formation. First sergeant said, do we have any prior service here? And I kind of looked around and didn't see any hands, so I put my hand up. He said, how many years service you got? I said, 19, First Sergeant. Come here, boy. I went up there and reported to him. He said, you're not old enough to have 19 years service. And I leaned forward and I said, First Sergeant, I knew you when you was a corporal at Camp Kashi, Japan, and they'd throw you out of the NCO club for being drunk on Friday and Saturday nights. He said, you get in that orderly room right over there, don't you talk to anybody, not the clerk, not even the CO, and wait for me. So I did. I was standing there, parade rest. He came in. He said to the two clerks was there, get out. He walked over to the CO's door and he said, sir, I'm going to close this door. I'm going to be in conference with a trainee out here. He said, sure, First Sergeant. He said, all right, who are you? Who sent you here? And what are you going to do? What are you up to? I said, I'm here for basic training. Don't give me that crap. I know better than that. You're here for something more than that. Somebody's got you after me, don't they? I said, no, First Sergeant, they sure don't. I said, do you remember a little boy about 4 or 5 years old that you give him a roll of nickels to play the slot machines at Camp Kashi? Yeah, he said, that was Jim Davis. And he looked at that name tag. He said, are you Vance? I said, I sure am, First Sergeant. He said, well, my goodness, son, didn't know you was old enough to be in the Army. And that was with my Army career. I had it made in basic training. I think I was the only trainee to ever go through Sand Hill that had his own cadre room. First Sergeant said, if your daddy raised you like I think he did, can you give PT? I said, sure can, First Sergeant. I can do it mounted or dismounted, however you want it done. He said, how about drill and ceremonies? I said, FM 22, set by my bedside, which is drills and ceremonies. All my life, I had one by my bed. I knew it by the time I was 12. He said, well, I'll be. He said, can you get the troops up in the morning, get them to PT, and then get them to the showers and get them to chow? I said, sure I can, First Sergeant. He said, I'll be there to watch you tomorrow morning. You're now trainee senior drill instructor. Took out this E8 Brizard and put it on my shoulder and pinned it on. He said, now, you're the trainee senior drill instructor. So, First Sergeant loved me, the drill sergeants loved me, the trainees hated me.
Why?
Oh, I can't imagine. I wasn't really one of them. Everything they were teaching, I'd already had. I had my orders there. He said, how did you get orders for weapons qualifications from headquarters, 101st Airborne Division? I explained it all to him, and he said, never heard of such a thing. And I've never met anybody else that ever did. Yeah. But we got to do a lot of it there. This Explorer post, we were involved in a lot of emergency operations on base. If they had a plane crash, we'd get called 2 o'clock in the morning. My dad thought they were getting called up. He almost broke his toe running through the house to get to the telephone. We lived out in Clarksville, 2 o'clock in the morning. And they said, this is a scoutmaster. Can I talk to Vance? So I just grew up in the military, so I felt like it was home. When I went to AIT, it was about the same way. I went to Fort Gordon, Georgia, advanced infantry training and pre-airborne school, and the deputy post commander at that time was General Kinzer. Well, his daughter and I dated in high school, Jeannie, and I said, I was home again. So,
tell you about bivouac and basic.
Bivouac and basic was just like scout camp to me, basically. I was very used to it. A lot of the guys cried. A lot of the guys just were disoriented. They didn't understand things. But, I got my pup tent set up, 2 shelter halves together, tent pegs, posts, and trenched around my tent. And the drill sergeant said, you learned all of that, didn't you? I said, yes, I did, drill sergeant. He said, well, I'm glad to see it. Now you get everybody else over here and show them how you did that. So bivouac to me is, again, it's like being home. I never was away from home. I was always in the military.
Yeah.
All my life. When I went to Vietnam, I felt like this is where I belonged.
Yep. How long basic last?
8 weeks.
Then you went to,
Fort Gordon, Georgia.
okay.
I was in C21 at Fort Benning, went to A21 at Fort Gordon, Georgia. And while there, I had a lung collapse on me, spontaneous collapse. And they put me in the hospital for about 5 days, and I came right back and got right back into my training so I didn't miss out on anything. They shipped me down to Fort Benning, Georgia. When we graduated, I went to Fort Benning, and they looked at my orders, and they said, "What are you here for?" I said, "Jump school." They said, "You've already qualified." "What are you doing in jump school?" I said, "Well, they sent me here. I guess it's just a procedural process. I have to go through a formality." He said, "Well, we'll get you in one jump, and you're done." That's, you know, he said, "We'll just take you up and let you do one jump."
You're qualified for jump school?
I went through jump school at Fort Campbell, Kentucky. They had an airborne school there at the time, and they put it back into operation pre-Vietnam. They knew things were gearing up, so they put it back into operation. Asked if any of the Explorer Scouts who were over 17, or 16 rather, would like to take that course and be involved in it. It's not going to be easy. It's going to be tough. You're going to run a lot. You're going to do a lot of PT. You're going to be yelled at and screamed at, may get cussed at. And my dad signed the letters, let him go. All the other kids did too. I think there were 7 of us that went through there, 6 or 7, as I recall. But we enjoyed it. Yeah. We were all athletes in school as well, so we were in pretty good shape.
Yeah. Had you flown before?
Had I what?
Had you flown before?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, I started parachute jumping when I was 10 years old.
Okay.
My dad was a master parachute rigger, and I said, "I want to jump." And he said, "Well, T-10's too big for you." He said, "But I'll make you a parachute." He said, "Shoot, we drop dogs. I know I can drop dogs. I can drop you." And so we never did tell Mother about it until I come back from Vietnam, that I've been parachute jumping all the time from the time I was 10 years old. And Dad, being a master parachute rigger, making a parachute was no problem for him. And first skydivers that coming around back in the 50s, when he started the skydiving stuff, all they had was T-10s, and Dad was involved in putting what's called a T-slot and dairy slots in them. So you could give a little guidance to it and make it function a little more like one of these newer chutes, which isn't any comparable to the wings and things of that nature, parachutes, the new paraglides. But anyway, he was doing that out of one of the bedrooms in our house. Mm-hmm. And when we were living in Memphis, Tennessee, he did quite a bit of that and then taught me how to use a sewing machine as well, because sometimes he needed me to help him stitch. And then he'd go back and inspect it and put his final stamp on that chute and send it on through. But it wasn't military use, it was skydivers that he was doing it for. So
how long did AIT last?
AIT was 9 weeks.
9 weeks. And how did AIT compare to basic?
Well, it was a lot more strenuous, a lot more disciplined. Basic was more or less to get young men oriented to the way of the military and not the way of mom and civilian life. Try to get all the civilian life and mama out of you and detach from that umbilical cord that mother had on a lot of young men. Get that all cut loose so they could make a soldier out of you. That's why you have to have that AIT as well. Mm-hmm. So it was just like it says, basic infantry or basic training. And so that's really all it was just very, very basic. Learn some rules, learn how to march, learn how to be in step, learn how to call cadence, learn how to fire a weapon, hopefully accurately, and do the things that you're supposed to do as a beginning soldier. You're not ready for combat when you finish basic. So ergo, on to advanced infantry training. And that's what we took, squad tactics and all of that at Fort Gordon, Georgia.
From Fort Gordon, where'd you go?
From Fort Gordon, I took a stint up to Baltimore, well, not Baltimore, but Aberdeen, Maryland. Mm-hmm. Went up to Aberdeen, Maryland up there for some special weapons training for the 20 millimeter Vulcan cannon. And then I was offered special weapons training on a few other, at that time, classified weapons, because I had a great proficiency with weapons. Mm-hmm. And so they wanted to get me familiar with other things. So I went up there and stayed up there about 6 weeks. And it was time to go. And they said, "Well, where would you like to go?" I said, "I got to get to Nam. This thing's it's getting old, guys. I got to go. This thing will mess around and get over before I can get there." They said, "Okay." So they cut orders. And the next thing I knew, I was flying out of McGuire Air Force Base, heading to Vietnam.
And you went to Vietnam when?
66.
You recall the date you left?
March 66.
March 66. When you were getting on the airplane at McGuire heading out, what were you thinking?
I was thinking, finally, it's about time. Mm-hmm. I was interviewed for a television news program. A bunch of us were sitting there waiting to get ready to go to the airport. And they said, well, how do you feel about going to Vietnam? And guys were saying, oh, I'm so scared and things of this nature. And I understand that, and I'm not sure about any of this. It's just really, I'm really uptight about it, as they used to say. And the guy came over to me, he said, are you going to Vietnam? I said, I sure hope so. And he says, you mean hope so? You want to go? I said, oh, yeah, I volunteered to go. Why would you volunteer to go? I said, my family has always been volunteers for the United States military. My dad's in Vietnam right now. And that guy's eyes got big. He said, what? I said, yeah, he's finishing up a tour over there right now. He went there with the 101st Airborne Division, got grabbed up by a colonel over there, Jack Bulldog King, they called him, and took him into 5th Special Forces Group. And so he did all their air delivery operations as well. So I said, I got to get over there. And I said, I'm excited about going, looking forward to it. And the guy says, you're the only one out here that is. Well, just the way I was raised, I guess.
Where'd you land in Vietnam?
We came in at Benoit.
Benoit.
There came the 173rd walking across the airstrip. They'd been out in the jungles, just had a big fight out there. And leading them out of there was a sergeant major named Johnson, who had been at Fort Campbell, Kentucky, who I knew when I was in the 2nd grade in Indiana. And his daughter was there, and Gloria. I knew all his family, and so his son Leslie and other son Frank. I just all these people as I grew up, military brats together, And so I hadn't seen her and him since I was in the 2nd grade, and here he was at Fort Campbell, Kentucky. So he had a nickname, and because he's a big guy, but it's he fooled you with his size. He wasn't slow at all, powerful man. But his nickname was Hog, and no young soldier would ever dare call him Hog. But I saw him coming across that airstrip, and at 173rd, I knew who it was the way he walked. And I shouted out loud, hey, Hog! Who is it? Weapon up, and he was ready to fight. I said, Vance Davis, how you doing, Sergeant Major? Boy, don't say that around here, you'll get whipped. He sat down and talked with me, I guess 20 minutes or so. I said, look, we just come out of a bad firefight out there. I've got to get back to the headquarters, get over to the AO and get things set up for the CO and the old man. And he said, good to see you. He said, what are you doing over here? I said, same thing you are. He said, well, keep your head down, your powder dry. He said, where's your dad? I said, he's up by the train right now, so I'll be up there to see him probably in a day or two. Of course, I knew Westmoreland, let's see, Comus MacV, that was his nickname. He was the commanding or United States Military Forces of Vietnam. And I knew him when I was a kid. I fished with him, hunted with him. My dad did too, we did. We just grew up there. And so I knew him as well. I got wounded in Vietnam. They took me down to 2nd Surgical Hospital in Nha Trang, Cam Bay. Took me down to Cam Bay, and I was in the hospital. They said, they're going to send you back to the United States. I was paralyzed from here down. I had a mortar round blowed my back up, and I got messed up pretty bad, and I was paralyzed for a while. He said, we're going to send you to America. I said, no, you can't send me this way. My mother would die if she sees me like this. And the hospital commander, I requested to see him, and so I went down to his office in a wheelchair, and he said, no, you're going back to America, soldier. I don't care what you think. I said, can I use that telephone right there? He said, sure you can. Who are you going to call, your mom? I said, no. I said, I'm going to call down to Comus MacV. Sergeant Major George Dunaway answered. He was Sergeant Major over there working under him. His boy and I played football together in school, so I'd known him all my life. And I said, Sergeant Major Dunaway, it's Vance Davis. How you doing, son? Good to hear from you. What's going on? I said, I'm at Cam Bay. I've got hit, and I'm paralyzed from the waist down, and I was told I'll maybe never walk again, and they want to send me home. My mama ain't going to like that. She'll die if she sees me looking like this. You know my mother. He said, yeah, Bonnie really be tore up. We all knew each other all our lives. So I was home, no matter where I was, Vietnam or otherwise. And I said, there's a nurse here whose father, she said, was a chiropractor, and she believes if she could work on me for a few weeks, she could get me walking again. And he said, well, just a minute, let me get the old man on the phone. General Westmoreland, it's Vance Davis. Oh, Jim's boy, get him over the phone. He got the phone. He said, what's going on, son? I told him the same story. He said, where are you right now? I said, I'm in the hospital commander's office. He said, put him on the phone. He said, the commander, I said, General Westmoreland wants to talk to you. He said, you're kidding me. I said, no, sir, this ain't a joke. This is General Westmoreland. He said, got on the phone. He said, this is Colonel Roberts. And about that time, he jumped to his feet. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Well, I ended up staying there, and 6 weeks later, I was walking. That nurse got me to walking, so the colonel said, "Are you ready to go home now?" I said, "No, I'm ready to go back to my unit. I can walk now."
Before that, what unit were you assigned to over there?
I was assigned initially to the 196 Light Infantry Brigade. And then they looked at all my background and training, and they moved me over, since I was airborne qualified, they moved me over to the Special Forces group. But I worked with all the leg groups in training their people for alert operations and special combat training. So I stayed a long time. That's one of the reasons I stayed a long time. I got a lot of firefights under my belt and got a lot of training under my belt. And as a low-ranking guy, I thought I did pretty good at all that. And
Now, how long were you in Vietnam?
3 years.
Before you got
No,
hit?
before I got hit, I was there, I want to say about 9 months.
9 months.
9 months it was.
What did
yeah.
you do in that 9-month period before you got
Well, I was with that 196 Light Infantry Brigade with A Company, 2nd of the 1st. I was doing operations with them.
Okay.
And I was a machine gunner and spent about 5 straight months walking point. And because I'm a hunter and I see things that other people don't see. And they'd always say, "Who's on point?" And I said, "It's Davis." And I wanted to walk point because I never walked us into an ambush. I never walked us into anything. But other guys could. And the last thing I wanted was a rookie to be up there walking point or anybody else to get lost when I could see things better than they could. I grew up in the woods. I grew up hunting squirrels. And I learned to find squirrels in the woods where most people didn't even know there was a squirrel there. Because I learned something from my dad when I was 5. He said, "Now look up in that tree. Do you see a squirrel?" And I looked and looked and looked. I saw nothing. He said, "Now I want you to look again, and I want you to just let your eyes go back and forth and look for something shiny. Anything shiny." "What's shiny in a tree?" He said, "Just look for something small and shiny." I looked, "Oh, yeah." He said, "What's around it?" And I got to look. I said, "Oh, it's a squirrel's head." Look for the eye. The eye reflects light. I used that in Vietnam. Saved my life and a lot of lives for that. Looking for the eye in the tree. Looking for the eyes in the jungle. Don't look for the bodies. You can't see them. They're camouflage. So look for the eye. I hunt deer the same way.
Now, what is walking point?
Walking point is you're the lead man. You've got a destination to go to. The CO has told you which direction you're heading, and if he wants you to change it, he'll send the first sergeant up to let you know which direction he wants you to head after that. We're heading to a certain hill or valley that we were going to head to possibly meet up and enclose with an enemy. Then I would lead out, and I would be about 20 meters ahead of everybody else. And then I'd have another guy back about 10 meters, only one guy back behind me. But other than that, nobody else is up there with you. So you're the lead guy. Most of the time, as I learned, if there was an ambush, they would want the point man to walk through and then get everybody else, because the point man would give them a sense of safety and security. But I always spotted them. I never walked us into an ambush and never walked us into a sniper.
How many on a patrol? Normally?
Well, normally on a patrol would be either a squad or platoon, one of the two we
How
would
many
have.
in a squad?
In a squad, we'd have somewhere between 10 to 12 in a squad. And in a platoon, we'd have as high as 40, 50 men. Just depended what kind of operation it was going to be as we were walking out. Sometimes it was a whole unit moving. So we'd have an entire company out on a patrol. And as we did in some cases where they would inject us into an area, "Okay, we need you to sit here and be a blocking force. Don't go anywhere, just stay right here." Our night watch, put the whole company out there in a company-size ambush at night. And operations of that nature.
Booby traps.
Booby traps, yes, you had to watch for those. Booby traps are hard to see because they're well camouflaged. But we had a lot of those. The grenades that they would set for you, claymore mines that they would set out for you with a tripwire on them, bouncing betties they called them, and also punji pits. But again, walking point, I had night vision that most guys would almost kill for it. They have that kind of night vision in those days. People would say, "Hey, Dave, would you go out and get my tripwire?" I could see them in the dark.
Now, when you're in 196, where in Vietnam were you?
Where? Well, we started off in Tay Ninh and we moved north. We went to Chu Lai and became a part of the Marical Division. But we were at the Parrots Beak, it's called, over there at Tay Ninh.
Yes. And what happened when you got hit?
Well, when I got hit, they immediately called in a dust-off, got me out of there and took me back.
Was it
Mortar round.
Mortar round.
Yeah, mortar round came in. It's hard to dodge them rascals.
Were you on patrol or what?
Yeah,
Okay.
moving early in the morning, almost at daylight.
Now, down there, was it VC or NVA down there?
It was VC.
VC. How'd the VCs get claymores?
Same way they get everything else. If they didn't steal them, somebody was supplying them.
Yeah.
I always had a feeling, as I tell people, they have more of our equipment than we do many times.
Yes.
So somebody has to be supplying these people with our equipment.
Yes.
And I told a guy in 1966, somebody's making a whole lot of money off this war, selling our stuff to the enemy. Because you always felt like whatever we had, they had as much, if not more of it, than we did.
So you stayed in Vietnam and you were walking again.
Yeah. Then in May of '68, we got into a big operation, huge. It was one of those like Mel Gibson had, in that we were soldiers.
Yes.
Well, May of '68, we got inserted into a place called Cam Duck. I read the articles that people have read on it. Some pilot did or something, I don't know. It wasn't accurate. We were supposed to be part of a 5-battalion blocking force. We were in an area called Cam Duck, close to the borders and on the western aspect of Vietnam. But it was an airstrip there.
Cambodia, Laos? Or
Laos, closer to Laos and
Okay.
Cambodia. There was an airstrip there. We had an A-team there. And some civilian people, a few ARVN Rangers were there. We got the word from Captain Ham, who was the CO at the time. He said, we're going to be inserted into a place called Cam Duck. We're going to be a blocking force, and there's 4 other battalions that's going to come in with us. We got in, and as soon as we got out of the plane, we started getting mortared. And I mean, it wasn't nothing but shovels and butts and digging. That's all that was going on there for a while. And every once in a while, you'd hear somebody screaming medic. We lost quite a few men out of that 2nd of the 1st, 196. A lot of guys were wounded and killed. And we were only there 3 days. The problem was they couldn't get the other 4 battalions in with all the mortaring. Constant attack. We had 3 outposts. On each outpost, Lieutenant Rainsbottom was in charge of that. He was a recon platoon leader. And we had these 3 outposts. Each of them had twin 50s and a 106 recoilless rifle on each outpost. Of course, we're an airstrip, so we're sitting down low. Outposts are up on the mountains. Lieutenant Rainsbottom, I heard the radio. He came over the radio on the 3rd day, and he said, they're coming through the door, my last transmission. Colonel Buck Nelson was our battalion commander. We, of course, in that 196 Light Infantry had our own 105s. We had our own 4-deuce mortars and carried everything with us. We were fully operational when we hit the ground. Everything came out of the planes. We got it set up. He said, blow those OPs to smithereens. And so that's what they did. And we fired 105s, we fired 4-deuce mortars, 81 mortars. We took M72 to Laws, and we started shooting toward those OPs. Because with what they had up there, we wouldn't have had a chance in hell. With all that armament up there with twin 50s and a 106 recoilless rifle, and we're down to, it's like sitting in a sugar bowl, and they're up on the top of it. You got no place to go down here at that airstrip. So we lasted about 3 days, and General Westmoreland ordered volunteers to come in and get us. They came in and I think it was C-134s with jet assist to get us out of there on that short runway. And first they shot down, if I remember this right now, 4 F-4C Phantom jets were shot down by the NVA. This was 5 brigades of the NVA coming. And we were just going to be part of a big blocking force where we were going to set up with 5 battalions. There was going to be 5 more elsewhere. Nobody got in but us. So we almost ended up like the 509th and the 106. We were all going to be used to be A Company 2nd of the 1st. So we thought our 2nd of the 1st rather period. We thought we were all going to get wiped out. We just knew we were dead meat. And we were ordered to burn all personal effects. If you got Bibles with names in it, tear the pages out and burn them. If you have identification, burn it. If you have pictures of mama, pictures of girlfriends, pictures of your wife, burn it. You don't want this in the hands of the North Vietnamese. We burnt everything. We thermite our grenade, thermite grenaded our 105s, thermite grenaded all of our 4-deuce mortars and our 81s. We thermited everything that they might be able to get and use, blowed ammo cache to pieces. This was a 3-day constant battle, though. When we hit the ground, we were under attack. And they came at us, came at us, and came at us. I was recommended for a high award. I didn't get, and I didn't care about it. But when they would fly over in the choppers as fast as they could and drop ammunition, oftentimes they dropped it out in front of us. We had to have that ammo, so I jumped up and ran out, grabbed 2 big cases of ammo, one in each hand by the rope on the end, you know, the ammo box wood ones. I grabbed the ropes and I run back with them. I wasn't even firing. I'm just running, trying to keep low and run hard as I could go, and drug it down my hole, opened them up, bandoliers of M16 ammunition, M79 grenade ammunition. I just started running from hole to hole and giving everybody ammunition we needed. And I grabbed up an M79, and it was the first crew-served M79 I ever saw. So normally M79 is a one-man operation. I had guys opening up shells and everything and feeding them to me, putting them in. I'm just shooting, boom, 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 just trying to cover a ground, lay a pattern out there. But it was really ugly, really ugly.
Did you have the beehive round up there?
And what?
Did you have the beehive round up
Oh,
there?
yeah.
Did you use that?
No, we didn't have it where we could use it.
Okay.
If we could have got to it to use it, we'd have been in good shape.
Yes.
We couldn't get up. We pulled our entire battalion back to the airstrip on that 3rd day. We all were there. Everybody was lined up. 3 of us, myself, Roger Cruchar, and Pete Herford, took M60 machine guns and went to the end of the airstrip to hold them off as long as we could till people got in. They said, when you hear this horn blow, that's the last airplane. You better be in it. So we walked backwards, staging fires. We walked backwards with M60 machine guns till we got in on the tailgate of the airplane, still down. They threw cargo straps around our legs to hang on to us with people grabbing on, and we were still firing as the plane took off. It was crappy as a coon fight.
What airplane were you on?
It was a C-134 with a jet assist on it.
C-134, is that the Caribou?
No. This is a C-134 is a big troop carrier.
Okay.
But it had jet assist so it could land quick or take off quick on a short runway.
Now C-130, now the C-130.
I think it was a C-130, not a 34. C-130, yeah,
okay,
C-130 with jet assist, yeah, not 34.
The Caribou is a C-123.
23,
Yes.
yeah. My dad crashed in one of them while he was there.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a real bad operation there
Yeah.
at Cam Duck, and we lost a lot of good men. One young man I didn't know till I came back to, till I'd been preaching. I'm a minister now, I preach for the Churches of Christ, but I was in Rawls, Texas, preaching for the church there, and internet just came out, and I looked at the wall. I've never been to the wall. I don't think I can handle the wall. But I saw the inscriptions and stuff that were there, and it said, search for a name. There was a kid there who got killed the night before the 3rd day. His name was Juan Jimenez. He's from Texas. Juan and I were whispering, and I said, I got to go. I got to get back to my hole. He said, stay over here. And I said, no, I got to get back and cover over here. I can't leave that gap open. So I low crawled back to my hole. I just went down in the hole, and the earth just erupted, the loud boom. I whispered, Jimenez. No sound. Back out of my hole, and I crawled over to the hole where he had been. When I crawled over to the hole, I grabbed a handful of what was him and mortar round and cut him in half, sitting on the side of the hole. I told him, get down in your hole. His bottom half was still hanging on the side of the hole. His top half was over here somewhere. I didn't find it till daylight. But I drug him all back in there and got him in a body bag. And I hand carried that body bag and put it on a helicopter. All those years, from May the 12th, 1968, I just went through this May the 12th again. Every Mother's Day I go through this because that was our last day. Yeah. Anybody that was there had on their helmet, May 12th, Mother's Day, the longest day, because we thought that was the end of it all. And I thought his body was taken out. But when I looked at that thing at the Vietnam Wall in 1995, it said body not recovered. I come unglued. I got on the phone to Washington. I started calling people that I knew who used to be in, who had connections. I said, something's got to be done. This body was recovered. I know it was. I put it in a body bag and I put it on the chopper. And so these people in Washington said, well, if we sent you back over there, if we take you there, could you tell us where you were? I said, I can see that like it was yesterday morning. I know right where I loaded him. I know which way the choppers went out of there. They said, we'll get back to you. We may have to take you to Vietnam. Well, Come to find out, they found out through the action reports or after action reports that were submitted that the helicopter that had the deceased on him was offloaded at the other end of the airstrip to put on the wounded and surviving civilians that they had to get out of there. And so they dumped all the dead bodies out. Hopefully they would get buried. Well, undoubtedly they did. They put them in a mass grave. And they told me that's what happened. We may need your help finding where that chopper, which direction the chopper went and all that. I said, I can walk you to where it went. I know the direction it took from there. And so I thought they were going to do that, and they sent a team in there, and they said, yeah, we've recovered them now. We wouldn't have known where to look if you hadn't called us and told us. Man, that broke my heart. I cried for days for that poor mother wondering where her son's body was, and dad. Juan was a character. I always called him Jimenez just to irritate him. His name was Jimenez. Juan Jimenez. Good man, as all our troops were. Good man. Kids. As I look back now at 72 years old, we were just kids. But like Mel Gibson said, we were soldiers.
Yes.
You can't forget it. I never forget that day. Those were the 3 hardest days of Vietnam. And I came back in March of '69, almost a year later.
Where were you when Tet broke out?
I was doing a special operation in close to Cholan,
Where's that?
west of Saigon.
Okay.
I was doing a special operation down there. I did some other work with some organizations of the United States government that I'm not free to discuss. But they had me doing a special operation there to eliminate the possibility of enemy forces and others interested in that acquiring American money to make these purchases with. So me and 8 other people were in this operation. And so that's what I was doing when Tet hit. And we were out there all alone, which kind of makes you nervous. But they weren't after us because they thought we were feeding them what they wanted. And of course, what they were getting wasn't what they wanted. But they thought that's what they were going to get. And so they were trying to launder money through stolen checks. This is a big thing going on, stolen checks. And they used what we only knew as South Indian Muslims who were involved in a lot of these money changers in Vietnam and Saigon area. And these money changers worked close with the others who were supplying weapons. And at that time, I spoke Vietnamese pretty well. And I got grabbed up and asked if I would help. I said, anything I can help them, anything I can do to help stop these people from getting our weapons and our claymores and everything else they're getting freely. I want to, if I can help, I'll help. Mm-hmm. Well, you may lose your life. I said, well, I may lose my life out here. I may lose my life in a car wreck somewhere. But if I can help, I'll help. So I went and did a special operation that I've never been able to tell anybody what it's all about.
Yeah, we were.
And as far as I know, it's still classified, so I can't.
Oh yeah, with the first Cav, we were told that for every greenback you have, you can get 7 NPCs.
Yeah.
For greenback.
Yeah.
But don't get caught with greenbacks.
Yeah.
If you
They
have
catch you with greenbacks, you're oh boy.
Yes.
And this is where massacres would almost take place when they change the NPC, because
Yes.
they'd do a change up on the NPC and they'd be throwing bags of money over the fence trying to get that NPC changed into the new NPC.
Where were you when that happened, when they changed NPC?
I was out in the jungles, so I didn't have to worry about it. I didn't come into base camp very much at all. I didn't really want to come into base camp. When our unit would come into base camp and it'd say, now we're going to have to leave some guys out here. Who wants to stay besides Davis? It was a given, I'm staying. It's kind of like who's walking point tomorrow besides Davis? Anybody else? That was just the way I was. And
What did you do during Tet?
during the Tet,
Yes.
oh my goodness. During Tet, we were doing some infiltration operations into the North Vietnamese area. And we moved up to from Cholan, we moved north. And we were moving in civilian vehicles. And they were Vietnamese vehicles. And we were moving in those as rapid as we could to get north to infiltrate where we thought we could do some stoppage of this Tet thing. And it worked, quite a bit of it did. But we moved in there with a lot of the other guys who were wearing some little berets. And it worked out very well. It helped, I think Tet would have lasted 6 more months if they could have kept it going the way they wanted to. The guys got in there and we did our duty and we did what we had to do to shut this thing down, from our end of it anyway. And being a blocking force sometimes helps to shut off things at the borders.
Yes. Did you work with the mountain yards?
Oh, those are some great people. They were a different breed of people. Don't tell a mountain yard how bad you are, because once the translator gets it across to them how great you are, they'll prove it, or you'll die from their proving it. We had a guy who claimed that tigers feared him. He was so bad. I said, you shouldn't have said that. And he said, well, I want to be impressed, these people to be impressed with me. I said, no, you said the wrong thing. They took him out and tied him to a tree at night and painted him with goat's blood to see how afraid the tigers were of him. The tigers eat him. Wasn't nothing we could do about it. Yeah. The tigers rended him tooth and nail and eat him, and the mountain yards had a barrel. Well, it wasn't a barrel, it was a big old pod container with a hardwood lid on it, and they had these straws made out of a big reed. And these guys, you see them wear the bracelets in Vietnam? Well, the original ones were mountain yard bracelets. Yes. The mountain yards gave those to you because you qualified.
I still have one.
You still have one? I had 4 of them with different tribes. But you were a real warrior when you drank with them out of that pod. And I don't know what all was in it, never did know, didn't want to know. I saw it once, which really it made me hesitate to drink it the 3rd time. But working with them was working like in another third world area. It was almost like going back in time. Very primitive people, very honest people.
Yes, but they were good hunters with that little.
Oh, you better believe they was.
Yes.
They lived fine off the land.
Yes.
And when you tell them you're a hunter, they like to see it. Oh, I told them I'm a hunter. What do you hunt? And I told them a squirrel, in Korean squirrels, taramji. I can't remember what it is in Vietnamese. When I told them squirrel, they rolled and laughed. They thought that was comical. You had a little bitty thing like, that's not enough to eat. But I told them, no, you shoot a bunch of them, it is enough to eat. And when I told them we shot deer and other things, oh, okay. But, I said, I grew up as a little boy hunting, so, we worked well with them. Mm-hmm. And they didn't like to work with us a lot. They did not seem to really appeal or have an appeal to the idea of working with us. But if it meant helping them, they were for it, as long as it was going to help them. But it's just to enlist them to come along with an operation that had nothing to do with them, they weren't for that at all. Good people, though, honest people.
Yes.
I used to think that everybody in Vietnam that wasn't American was at least a liar. Because they were, and it's the only country in all my life, and I lived in France, Germany, Italy, Spain, England, Japan, Taiwan as a kid. I was everywhere with my dad. This is the only country I was ever in where a kid could steal a radio and leave the music. Did you ever see that?
No.
I saw it at the airport in Quy Nhon, the airport there. It's a hospital, an airport. We were over by the airstrip, and this guy was leaning back on a duffel bag, and he had a small little radio sitting here, and he was listening to music. And I saw this young Vietnamese boy come up behind him, and he picked his radio up. Guy didn't know it. And he backed up. As he backed up, he kept turning the volume up, getting louder and louder and louder. The guy's foot was still patting to the music, and it was gone. I caught the kid around the other side of the building. When he come running around, I grabbed him up real quick, and I walked him back over there. I said, what are you listening to? He said, oh, just some, where's my radio? I said, I got it right here. He said, well, how did you get it? I said, this kid stole it. He said, no way, man, I was listening to it. I said, no, you just thought you were. He stole the music, stole the radio and left the music. Of course, most of those radios were hooked up with a PRC-25 battery cut in half. That's what he had on there. Stole the radio and left the music. That was unique.
Who is your RTO?
Let me think. RTO. We had 3 of them. 2 of them got killed. But the last RTO we had was named O'Brien. And Bobby O'Brien, he was good. He was good. We had another one before him named Vickers. And one before him was named Loach. Bobby Loach. But a good RTO is worth his money in gold.
Yes.
A guy that knows how to call in what he needs to call in when you need it.
Now, what do you do during a firefight?
Well, it depends where you are. If you're on the receiving end, of course, if you're in the midst of a firefight that was started by the other side, the first thing you do is get down, assess the situation, And after you've made a proper assessment of the situation, then issue some commands or orders thereunto to alleviate this attack on you. But if it's your attack, you continually press forward and eliminate the enemy. That's the purpose of it. It's not to take prisoners. Although then once it's over with, you go through the bodies and filch out what information you can in documentation, if there is any. But firefights were some scary things the first time you get in one.
Now you said you were at Chulai?
Yeah.
When are you there?
That would have been in 67, Chulai. Late 67 in Chulai.
Okay.
And they had a thing there called the Charger Academy. And this is where newbies would come in and they'd take them through an in-country training program, tell them how to see this, how to see that, put them on a bunker line for the very first time. And it was interesting there, when you bring them into because they're not going to stay in Chulai. Very few stay in Chulai except the rear area guys. With surrounding forces for them because that's your quartermaster area basically. And Chulai airstrip was there, of course. And then Chulai, the guys at the airstrip over had to compete with the mosquitoes for JP4 because they had big mosquitoes there. But it was an interesting place, Chulai. A lot of guys got hurt down there that didn't need to get hurt by going to the Ville and not using proper caution. And told them never buy a cigarette lighter from a native. You're going to blow yourself up one of these days buying them cheap cigarette lighters that look nice. But guys would do it anyway, blow their face off if it didn't kill them. But Chulai was a big town. Ran a lot of operations out of there north to LZ Ross and LZ Baldy, which were north of Chulai. And so we'd run operations back and forth between those two, Baldy and Ross. We were on Baldy, as a matter of fact, when LZ Baldy, when they said we were going to get inserted into Cam Duck in May of '68. We were up there on LZ Baldy. And we started off, we was on Ross, and we did a long march all the way over to Baldy, a road march over to Baldy, and then they told us the next day we were going to be inserted into Cam Duck. That was bad.
How long were you in Vietnam?
1 month shy of 3 straight years.
Okay. Why'd you stay there 3 years?
Doesn't sound right, but I enjoyed it.
What's your best memory of Vietnam?
Arriving there. I couldn't wait to get with my unit. It was like this is a dream fulfilled.
Were you with the 196 the whole time?
No, not all the time. Like I said, I had to do special operations with the 5th
Okay,
Special
okay,
Forces
right,
Group as
that's
well.
right.
But yeah,
Yes.
but I did a lot of time with them in training programs for the 196 as well. I could lend assistance in further combat training than what they'd normally get, and especially on the in-country training that they got when they came in. I took great pleasure in trying to teach guys how to stay alive and how to send rookies back. And when I came back from Vietnam, I was at Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, and because of my injuries that I'd received over there, staying in combat any longer wasn't feasible for me, so I went into my secondary MOS, which was medicine, and I was working with the units there. I was a drill sergeant for a little while at Fort Leonard Wood. When I first came back, Senator Symington come down to see me because I had a couple of congressional reports come in on me for mistreating trainees, and I said, no, I'm just tough. And so the colonel called me in. The senator wanted to see me, so I went in to visit with the colonel, Stuart Symington, and reported to my colonel. He said, this senator would like to talk to you about your treatment of trainees. Yes, sir, what can I do for you? He said, well, I have these letters from mothers of their sons being treated harshly by you. And he went on and on with it for a while. I said, I understand, sir. He said, did you do any of these things? I said, probably all of them. You admit it? I said, well, yes, sir. I said, could I ask you a question, sir? Feel free. I said, I know of a fact that you wrote a letter to my dad when he was wounded in Vietnam, because he's been a lifelong, basically listed as being from Missouri all his life. I said, you sent me a letter when I was wounded twice in Vietnam. I got a letter from you, and you're great concern for me. I said, do you take pleasure in writing the letters to the mothers and fathers of the boys that don't get to stay alive? Of course not. but it's a privilege and an honor to be able to send them a letter thanking them for their son and his sacrifice for the nation. I said, yes, sir. But did you enjoy writing those letters? No, I didn't enjoy it, but it was something necessary. I said, would you like to write more of them? Of course not. I said, then leave me alone, because I'm training them how to come back to life instead of in body bags. That's why I'm harsh and tough with them. I spent 3 years over there. I know what'll keep them alive and what won't. And I know these little game antics that they're trying to play in basic training are going to get them killed. So that's all I'm trying to do. He got up, he said, Colonel, leave that man alone. I said, I think I'd like to get out of being a drill sergeant and go back over to being in the hospital for a while. So I did that. Went to work as a 91 Charlie in the hospital.
What's that, 91 Charlie?
Clinical specialist.
Okay.
Same in civilian life as an LPN,
Okay.
with the abilities to do what most RNs can't even do today, but I did that. And then I was a physician assistant for 9 years in Korea.
Now, did you fly in helicopters over there?
Yes, quite a bit.
Okay.
Matter of fact, I was in one that crashed. He got shot down, and I was in it with 2 other guys, and the pilot and the co-pilot. And it came down, and when it came down, I jumped out just before it landed, or smashed. It wasn't landing, it was hitting. I leaped out of it and made a 1-point landing on this elbow and bummed it all up real bad. And the other guy lived as well. The pilot and co-pilot both lived. But the first thing we did was get out and grab weapons and get ready, because you know as soon as the chopper goes down, the Kong's coming. Meantime, the co-pilot's on the radio trying to do everything he can to get somebody out there for us. We were only about probably 5 clicks away from where we took off when we got hit. So it didn't take very long to get 3 other helicopters out there for us. Gunships came out. And they held off everybody till they got a dust off in there to get the rest of us out. That chopper, of course, was scavenged and burned. We threw thermite grenades in it to burn it up.
Well, where did that happen in Vietnam?
That was about 5 clicks due northwest of Chulai.
Okay. And when did that happen?
That was in 68.
68.
Yep.
Okay.
But I flew a lot of, coming in a lot of hot LZs, when you're being inserted. And so we did a lot of that.
What do you do when you come into hot LZ?
You get your butt out quick. that helicopter's too big a target. So as soon as he's close enough to the ground that you think you can jump without breaking both legs, you get out of there. Because, it's kind of like getting 50 guys around the CP.
Yes.
The CO's not going to like it because you're a huge target drawing fire in on his AO. So that was one of our COs used to say, "Oh, get all these people out here." It'd be 3 or 4 of them. Get all these people out there going to draw fire into the OP or the CP. But yeah, you coming in on a hot LZ, you're in helicopters, you're coming in for an assault.
Yes.
So you're coming in to give support to troops that are probably already there and in bad need of you getting there. And that's what we did. We come in on a hot LZ with that and an air assault, right on through. But you get out. That's the first thing you do is get yourself out of that helicopter as fast as you can. Because if that thing gets hit, you're going to blow up with it.
That's right.
And you hit the ground, you roll, you practice your jump school training. Hit and roll. You hit on the balls of your feet, then roll and get back up, moving toward wherever you're supposed to go. And they'd say, that tree line over there, that jungle, that's where you're heading, get over there. So just start running. If it's in a rice paddy, slosh your way there, whatever you have to do. And try not to get shot.
What are the monsoons?
What are they? Well, they're about the equivalent of what we had in Oklahoma 2 weeks ago. But they don't quit for several months. They just go on and on and on. And so that's the rainy season of Asia. They have this every year. Korea has monsoons as well. I spent a lot of time there. But Vietnam had some tough monsoons.
How do you stay dry in the monsoon?
You don't. The only people that stay dry in the monsoons are the people in the rear areas, because infantry troops never stay dry. You do the best you can with a shelter half or a poncho, and that's one of the stupidest things we ever had in Vietnam was poncho liners. Who needs a thermal liner in Vietnam? But they had them for us. But nobody used them. We had cases of them sitting back in Chulai that nobody ever used. But they was good for trading to the CBs for new fatigues if you needed some. Yes. But you take your poncho, make you a little lean-to out of it, like you learned to do when you were a kid, and make things as you were in scouting, or as they taught you in advanced training, how to make your own little cot and bed and area like that, and try to make it on high ground and not down in a hole, but be near a hole so you can get in it when you have to. If it's up to your waist in water, so be it, get in it. But the only problem with the water there is most of it, even a foxhole, was full of leeches.
What about the wildlife in Vietnam?
Well, the wildlife that I encountered more than any, now over in some of the western area, we encountered tiger a couple of times. In northern area, a couple of elephants. And contrary to popular belief, you don't hear elephants coming. They're so quiet walking through the jungle, you never hear them. You think you would hear something that big. But their feet are so large that they press the ground in smaller areas. You feel a rumble, but you never really hear the elephant walking. They're very quiet. But tigers, occasionally we would run into the tigers. The biggest ones I run into in Vietnam were cobras. That's the wildlife I didn't like at all. They had a little version of a mongoose there, Asian mongoose. And I witnessed a few of those fights. The mongoose always won. But he always won against the cobra. I saw a mounting one time that I wanted to buy. I didn't know how I would ever get it home. But it was a large cobra with his bottom half of his tail and all wrapped around a mongoose, but the mongoose had him behind the hood, biting down on him. I said, now that's a mount I'd love to have. Of course, if I had it now, my wife would make me put it in the shop and keep it in the house. But yeah, that was about it for wildlife, because the meanest animal over there was a water buffalo.
Oh, yes.
He had no respect for anybody but that little kid riding on his back.
Yes.
So, he sure didn't like American smells.
And you don't dare get between a water buffalo and a calf.
No, not ever.
Yeah.
Or that little kid riding on his back, because he'll defend that little boy just as much as he will, or she will, as much as a calf. But these people were very content people I found in Vietnam. The old guy out there in the village, he'd get up in the morning, smoke his opium pipe, get on his water buffalo with that plow over his shoulder, and go out and work all day, come home, eat a bowl of rice, bean, and fish head, and get back up and start it all over again the next day, content to live that way. Seemed like they were not a very ambitious people to want to move on toward anything else. They were satisfied with their lives out there in those villages. And so when we came into the villages, it generally brought a lot of harm to them at times, because the Viet Cong always watched and had their guys in the villages as well. And of course, if the people talked to you at all, it was just bringing down trouble on them. I would go into the village, I'd talk with the people, I'd eat their food. They'd warn us, don't eat their food, don't eat their food. I said, well, it's not killing them, it's not going to kill me, I can eat anything. And I'd go into a village, I carried a bottle of Nook Mom in my rucksack. You remember the Nook Mom sauce, fermented fish oil? They'd offer me a bowl of rice, might have one green bean in it and a little fish head on it, and that'd be about it, something to chew on. And I'd just get my Nook Mom out and put it on there, and I'd sit down with my chopsticks and I'd eat with them, laugh and talk and visit, and good people. They were happy. You ask them questions about the Viet Cong, all of a sudden everybody's dumb, because they're afraid of what's going to happen to their families and their village. So. And then, of course, we had some people that thought the best way to win these people over was burn their village down, and that wasn't helping. That's where civil affairs groups had to go in and pay thousands and hundreds of thousands of dollars to get these villages back up. Every war has atrocities. Every war has atrocities. And I don't care where it is. I just heard about an atrocity yesterday from a Navy SEAL who plugged the air hole on a air vent going into a guy's throat so he could breathe, and he put his finger over it, let the guy die. He's going to die anyway. Maybe. But I don't ever do anything to hasten anybody's death. If they're wounded and they're laying there wounded, I never give mercy shots to them. Say he'll die of that wound, I'll just go ahead and kill him. No. I'm a combat soldier, and I believe in war. I believe the Bible teaches it, because God sent his people in to fight wars a lot of times. And he said, don't leave anything, man, woman, child, or animal alive. Same God that I serve today. So I'm not a conscientious objector because I'm a Christian. I don't believe being a Christian is a good reason to say you're a conscientious objector. I saw Hacksaw Ridge. That was a good show, and supposedly based on a true story. Good for him, and he had his convictions and beliefs, but they're not Bible-based. They're mistaught Bible. Jesus stated in the book of Luke, chapter 22, verse 36, he told his disciples, when I sent you out the first time, did you lack anything? He said, go out, don't take your purse, your cloak, or your bag. And they went out, and he said, did you lack anything? He said, no, we had everything. He said, and I protected you. He said, but I'm not going to be with you anymore. Now when you go out, you take your purse, you take your cloak, you take your bag, and if you don't have a sword, sell your coat and buy one. Now that tells me they're going to have to defend themselves. Jesus kept them protected while he was with them. He said so. But after he's gone, now they're going to have to protect themselves. So, and Peter carried a sword as it was, or he carried some type of knife with him because he cut off that guy's ear, Malchus's ear, the night Jesus was arrested. And Jesus said, who lives by the sword will perish by the sword. That's understandable as well. That's somebody who lives that way to kill with the sword. It's not combat. He's not talking about that. But he is in Luke 22:36. Self-defense, at least. And God taught about wars. So they're not unholy things. They're not ungodly things because God ordered them. It can't be ungodly if God orders it. So that's one of the reasons I was able to be, I think, a good combat soldier, but I didn't abuse it. I had the power to take a lot of lives that didn't need taking. And I'd rather save a life than take it any day.
I asked you your best memory of Vietnam. What's your worst memory of Vietnam?
My worst memory of Vietnam was Cam Duck, when we were losing men left and right. When they were shooting down 4 F-4C Phantom jets, half a dozen AE-1 Sky Raiders, gunships were being blown out of the air like nothing was there. I mean, just quick, taking them out. Because we weren't fighting the Viet Cong there. We were fighting the NVA. They were regular Army. And they were qualified men. And they were tough. And we laid waste to a bunch of them. A whole lot more than they laid waste to us. But it was one of those battles where you just knew. Half the people walking around still fighting were bandaged up. And they got us out of there. That was the worst day of Vietnam that I ever had.
Tell me about coming home.
Coming home was not a picnic at all. When we came in, of course, they brought us, I came in through Travis Air Force Base. And they had protesters outside the gates, you know, and screaming and yelling. We had to go get civilian aircraft and fly home. Of course, they were at the airports and screaming baby killers at us, spitting at us, throwing bags or balloons of urine. And one of them walked up and started to reach for my uniform. I said, that'll be the last thing you ever touch, son. Don't put your hands on this Army uniform. I said, I fought well for my country. I'll do it again, but I hate to have to start it here at home. So you stay away from me. He told him I threatened him. And the MP said, well, then leave him alone. That was a bad day.
Yes.
Our coming home.
I remember that.
It wasn't fun.
No.
We were dishonored and forgotten.
Yeah.
They left it that way for years.
Yes. And you were in the Army how long after Vietnam?
17 years total, 3 months and 10 days.
Why
I
not
got
20?
Well, I got in a car wreck at Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. Had bilateral concussions.
Okay.
Couldn't function half the time. And doctor recommended me for medical retirement since I was almost at 18 years anyway.
Okay.
So he recommended medical retirement, and the board looked it over and said no, because by the time they got around to doing the full evaluation, I was already transferred from the Army, still on active duty now. I was in medical holding company at Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. And I got saved during that time, and I was trying to get my life right with God and stay that way, become a more spiritual person rather than a worldly. And I don't regret it at all. I love it. I still do. But I knew I needed, I understood the idea of training being necessary. Jesus had disciples. He was with them 3.5 years and still lost one. And they still didn't understand a lot. So I know that I needed training. If I'm going to be a preacher for Jesus, I needed a lot of training. And I talked to several other preachers in Missouri, and they said, why don't you go to Sunset School of Preaching? I'd never heard of it. I never heard of a school of preaching. He said, well, did you ever hear of the School of the Prophets? I said, well, yeah, it was the Old Testament. I heard about that. But he said, well, we have schools of preaching in America. You can go to one of those and learn how to be a preacher and learn a lot more Bible. So he gave me a thing off the back of a magazine. He said, this is called Sunset School of Preaching. It's in Lubbock, Texas. Lubbock, Texas. Mac Davis country out there, And anyway, I wrote in for an application. They sent it to me, and I was still in medical holding company there at Fort Leonard Wood, and I was on what's called SEW, subsistence elsewhere. So I wouldn't have to stay in a hospital. I just lived at home in government quarters there at Fort Leonard Wood with my wife. And I got accepted to this school. And even with this bilateral concussion, I wasn't an idiot, but I had trouble doing my job. And they didn't want to entrust me to taking care of patients and medication if I might fall out. So he recommended me for medical retirement, not medical discharge. Instead, the evaluation board, after I was already in school, so I went to the colonel and I said, do I have to wait here? He said, wait where? It's Fort Leonard Wood. I said, I'm waiting on separation. I'm sitting here in medical holding company. I do absolutely nothing but make a phone call once a month. I'm still alive. That's all I do. Can I do this somewhere else? He said, where you want to wait? And I told him Lubbock. I've been accepted to a school. He said, you got a letter of acceptance? I said, sure do. And I showed him that letter from Klein Payton. He looked at that and he said, personnel colonel, he said, cut orders and assign him to this school. He said, who's in charge of this? I said, Klein R. Payton. Right there is his letter. He said, put him down as report two for commanding. And I was assigned to the Sunset School of Preaching in Lubbock, Texas, on government orders, bag and baggage. They moved everything down there. And that was in December of 1983. I started school in January, graduated in January of 86, been preaching Jesus ever since. Whole new man. Any memories?
After Vietnam, where'd you go in the Army?
Well, after Nam, I went to Campbell, then I went back to Fort Leonard Wood, and that's where I mustered out at Fort Leonard Wood.
Okay.
They asked me, where would you like to go? And I said, Fort Leonard Wood, because my dad had retired in Cuba, Missouri, which is 50 miles away.
Yes.
So that put me close to Dad. I'd go squirrel hunting with him.
Yep.
Hear his old war stories, and he could hear some of mine for a change.
Would you join the Army again?
In a heartbeat. In a heartbeat. If I was a young man, I would go in today. I would go in and do whatever I could do to assist my country in being a faithful soldier. I took an oath. That oath still stands. It wasn't rescinded because I'm no longer on active duty. Oaths are not contingent upon status. Oath is something you made before man and God. My oath still stands. I got alerted for Desert Storm. I had a sergeant major call me from Fort Stewart, Georgia. Said, could you run a forward aid station and maybe an infantry squad or platoon? I said, sure I can. He said, report to the nearest recruiting station in Lubbock, Texas. I'll call and get you processed. I had to go in, retook the ASVAB test because I'd been out so long. This was in 88.
Yes.
He said, you're going to have to take the ASVAB test again. I qualified for everything, including Command General Staff colleges. So I've really scored high on the ASVAB. We went up there, and guy said, man, you can get anything you want. I said, well, I'm not worried about it. I'm going to get reassigned here. I said, and I just need to get processed. So 2 days later, they're going to send me up to the MEP station in Amarillo. And they called in and said, stand down, it's over. It's all over. I said, well, shoot. Matter of fact, the Churches of Christ in that time we don't ordain ministers. It's not an ordination process. It's a training process. It's an idea of you believe this is what God wants you to do, and you're involved in getting trained so you can do that. But as far as writing letters of ordination or certificates and stuff, the Churches of Christ didn't do that years ago. They do somewhat now because so many people are asking for it and they're trying to look like everybody else. But I knew that if I went into the Middle East, I would have to have an ordination paper in order to preach over there. So I went back to the elders at Sunset because I was in Sundown, Texas at the time, preaching there in an oil field. So I went over to Sunset School of Preaching and told them I may be getting deployed here real quick like, and I'm going to need a certificate of ordination from the school. So they made up one and predated it back to 1985, 86 when I graduated. Yeah. So I've still got that on my wall here in town in Muskogee, Chandler Road Church of Christ. But, it was just something different in my life. It's really changed a lot. But like I said, I took an oath. And if my country needed me today, if President Donald J. Trump called me up and said, Vance Davis, I need you and your medical expertise back in the Army. I need you to come. I said, sir, can I preach? Whatever you want to do, but I need your medical work overseas, somewhere in the Middle East right now. I'd go. Yes. Recall me, put me at any rank you want me to be, but make me free to do the job you want me to do. But when I'm not doing that job, I'm going to preach Jesus. I'd do it in a heartbeat. But I'm too dadgum old.
I'd like to do a word association. I'll give you some words and you give me your reaction.
Okay.
The first one is basic training.
Home.
AIT.
Great.
Vietnam.
Tough but wonderful.
Walking Point.
Loved it.
Firefight.
Exciting.
Cam Duck.
Brutal.
Mountain Yards.
Great people.
Tet.
Slaughter.
Ho Chi Minh.
A very smart man.
Lyndon Johnson.
First word that came to my mind, I don't want to say it, but it was traitor. That's the way I felt about him. He didn't back us the way he should have.
Richard Nixon.
Tricky Dick. Couldn't believe a word he said ever.
How do you want to be remembered?
I'd like to be remembered as a faithful preacher of the Word of God.
Anything else you want to talk about?
I pretty well covered it.
Sir, this is an excellent interview.
Thank you.
I want to thank you for your service and thank you for the interview.
Thank you for your service, sir.
And again,
Thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you. This is June 21st, 2019. My name is Joe Todd. This has been an interview with Vance Davis in Muskogee, Oklahoma. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.